Um, I imagine that when Paul would go out on his missionary journeys, that he would come back and he would spend time with the church, and he'd say, "Okay, well, this is what happened, and this is what I went through, and so on and so forth." And we don't get a lot of those details in the scripture, but today that's what this is going to be. I'm going to share with you what Sandy and I's last 3 weeks were like. A lot of people have asked, and I'm just like, you'll hear in the sermon. And I'm actually going to preach today and next Sunday. I'm also going to be doing, I call it a slide presentation. We don't do slides anymore, but we've got all kinds of pictures of the time that we spent in South Africa and so on and so forth. It's very interesting. We started our trip out on a Wednesday, and we had to be at the airport to fly out at 6 o'clock. So that mean in the morning, and that meant that we had to be at the airport at 2:30 in the morning. So our bright idea was to go to the airport around 10 o'clock and try to get some sleep. That does not happen in an airport in any way whatsoever. And we did our flying, and we finally got to Durban, which is the place where Doug was picking us up at about 8:30 the next day. So 6:30 in the morning, or 2:30 in the morning until 8:30 that night when we landed in Durban. I did not sleep a wink for those 2 days. I could not sleep on the plane. It was just, I just could not adjust to it. I felt crammed in. I don't know why I have these, it's a leg thing maybe, but it was just not fun in any way whatsoever. The trip was hard. Sandy was able to rest, so it was good for her. But we got to Durban and about 8:30 that evening, and Doug picks us up at the airport, and we could tell something wasn't quite right. That he wasn't completely feeling himself. So we got to Live Village. If you've read his book, The Orphanage, that he's spent a lot of time at. And our plan was to go and spend about 4 or 5 days there. And so we went to Live Village, got there about 9:15. I went straight to bed, and at about 10 o'clock, I was woken up. "Rob, you need to take me to the hospital, to emergency." I'm like, "Oh, great." Middle of the night, in a country that don't know in any way whatsoever. He gives me his phone with GPS, and we're trying to figure out how to get to this hospital about a half an hour away. You can go to a private hospital, or you can go to a national hospital, one that's taken care of, and you don't want to go to a national hospital. It's just terrible. You might as well pay the extra money to go to a good hospital. So we went to this hospital about a half an hour away, and we got lost a number of times, so on and so forth. So anyway, we spend the evening in emergency, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, he gets released. They wanted him to stay at the hospital in order to do surgery immediately. He did not have any insurance whatsoever. So we were trying to figure, okay, well, what are we going to do? Or he was trying to figure, what are we going to do? And we had a whole itinerary plan for a 3-week period. And we're not even an hour into this, and we're already spending time. So after this hospital trip, he's like, "I can't drive. Here's the keys." So I'm learning how to drive on the opposite side of the car, with the stick shift on the left-hand side, on the opposite side of the road at 3 o'clock in the morning, with not having sleep for the last 2 days and no lines on the roads in any way whatsoever. The highways are great, but you remember what the drive is back to the village. It's, over and under and all over the place. Sandy's praying fervently that we make it back, and about 3 o'clock we got back. And so we got to spend some good time. Friday we were all kind of exhausted, so we slept for most of the day, just trying to reclimatize. And they're 6 hours ahead of us, so we gained a whole bunch of time. It was just a really weird trip, and so on and so forth. But in the back of our heads, it's like, okay, Doug, what are you going to do here? Like, you've got a situation. And he was just like, well, let's just see how I feel tomorrow. And that was let's me see how I feel tomorrow. Oh, I'm feeling a little bit better. The pain's only at 4 today. And Sandy would ask him all the time, where's the pain level at today? And, go down to 3. And really, I think the pain was more like 8 or 9, but he was saying, well, it's only at 4. And he was feeling really bad because, he was supposed to be hosting us through this whole endeavor and so on and so forth. But we're Friday, as I say, we just kind of chilled and slept and so on and so forth. And we were supposed to be able to get together with Titch. If you've read his book, Titch is the guy, him and his wife Jan, who started Live Village. And he had been really, really sick and wasn't going to be able to meet with us. So that was like, okay, and that was Friday. Saturday morning, we had a call, and we're going to be able to spend some time with Titch. And so we met him at a store that's called Live. It's one of their outlets where they sell stuff and have coffee and tea. It's kind of like a Second Cup or a Starbucks, a place that all of the proceeds go to Live Villages in order to help them to operate. And so we got to meet with Titch, and we had about 2 hours with him, surprisingly, which was very interesting. And it was a very interesting time because, and Doug said to me afterwards, I don't even know why I was there, because he was talking directly into your life, Rob. And I was like, wow, what is it? Like he was going after me. He's like, you need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing this. You need to think about this. You need to ask for this from God. And I was like, wow. I was overwhelmed. But it was a great time nonetheless. And we got to spend time with Titch and get my life at the beginning of this trip aligned by Titch, who's, anyway. So then the next morning, Saturday, was worship time. And I think that I wrote in one of my lessons, Psalm 98, most likely, that, this morning I'm going to be worshiping with about 1,000 little kids and so on and so forth. Well, there's not 1,000 kids there. It's not that big. It can house 1,000, but, and what they do is, since COVID, when the COVID happened, is they had to break up and they could not have a group of more than 50 people. So they've divided it into different clusters or house churches, like what we would call them. And then every second week they meet together corporately. But we were there for the first week when it was just a house church. And we met with one of the couples that was taking care of this house church. Ironically, or not ironically, but thankfully, the husband and wife that were in charge of that cluster or that little church gathering, she has actually been here to Canada and had spent time at Doug's cottage, Sanchia. Barry and Marilyn got to meet Sanchia and her husband Jerry and their 2 kids, or 3 kids. They have 2 boys and a beautiful, just a beautiful little girl that they adopted at 18 months. She's 5 now. Ava is just precious little girl. You'll get to see some pictures of her. But we got to be able to meet with them, and he was leading worship. And during the worship time, all these kids in this room just praising God. And I'm going to have a hard time getting through some of this stuff today because it was so emotional. I was bawling my eyes out, listening to these kids, listening to these mothers who are in charge of these kids, singing, praising God. And it was just an experience that I couldn't believe. And then after, it was time for prayer. And everybody knows Doug really well at Live Village. And this group knows Doug really well because of Sanchia and Jerry. And so what they did is, like, we need to pray for Doug. So they put him in the center of the room and they sat him down, and everybody put their hands on him and they prayed for him. It was just very real to me, the worship. And I was extremely envious to see just the gut level peace that these people had. And looking at these little kids that were no more than a year old, and growing up to even teenagers that were still there in the orphanage, and to see them, and you could see the pain, you could see the trauma on their faces of what they had gone through. You could see it physically, the burn marks, the marring that had happened from parents and relatives, and who had just taken advantage of these little kids. And the amazing thing that all of the kids that are in Live Villages are all awarded to Live Village by the government, and they are the property of the state. And the state gives Live Village full authority and ownership of these orphans. And it's very interesting to see how they're awarded that, and the government gives them, amazingly, carte blanche on what they're able to do with these kids. They are able to instill in these kids a faith, and that's the number one thing of the village. If there's anything that they want to impact upon the children that are coming into their care, is that they have a father and he loves you. And it's amazing to see these kids who are marred, who, have one little girl, she had a bandage around her head, like a scarf, and you could see where the hair had been burned off. You could see the marks, but you'd never see it on her face with the smile and the joy. And, when the singing was going on, it was no books, no burying your head in a book. It was just, and people singing off tune, people singing, and it was just heartfelt worship to God. And it was amazing to be able to experience. Then we had to live. And we took a drive up to another organization that Doug spends a lot of time with, called ACAT. I forget what the acronym, it's African, you remember? Okay, African Christian Adult Training. And what they do is they train people. They don't just give them a fish, they give them a fishing pole. The idea. They teach them, they just don't take care of their needs, they teach them how to take care of themselves. And what Doug does there, and what we were supposed to be doing, we were supposed to spend a week there. Doug teaches all of these people that come in to get training the Bible. If you want to hear what his sermons are like to these people, it's exactly the same as what we hear or what you read in his book. It's just the same thing over and over. God loves you. He wants to have a relationship with you, and so on and so forth. And the interesting thing is that when he preaches, there's always an interpreter. So he says a few lines, and then another guy says a few lines in Zulu, and then and that's what it's like for most of the services there. Everything's interpreted into Zulu, which is the mother language of South Africa. English is spoken very fluently, but so it was very interesting to hear that side of it. But we got to spend some time with the people that run ACAT, where Doug is very, very involved with. He's got about 30 pastors that come to that compound, to that place, that are wanting to just get back to pure New Testament Christianity. No names, no labels, just the Bible. And if there's anything that I walked away with my whole experience in South Africa, was that I did not hear one person tell me, well, I'm from a Pentecostal background. Oh, I'm from a Baptist background. Oh, I'm from Church of Christ. Oh, I'm from Catholic. Not once. It was just a bunch of people that were Christians and wanted to be lights for Jesus. And I was like, wow. And it was weird, because I was like, isn't that what Acts 2 was all about? And we've created all these barriers. You meet somebody and it's like, okay, well, okay, oh, you go to church. Where do you go to church? They don't ask that question there. Oh, you go to church? Great. And it's not important, because the whole goal is just to get back to who is God and who is Jesus, and how can we instill the Holy Spirit in ourselves in order to do great things for Him. And that's what ACAT was all about. As I say, we only got to spend one morning there. Doug got to teach for a while, and we listened to that, and then we were able to go out for lunch with the guy that runs it, Rod and Ross. We'd actually spent a couple of hours with Rod on Monday because the people come in on Tuesday, and he kind of had a day off, but he typically doesn't. And we were able to, he carved out some time to be able, and again, he was kind of like Titch with me. He was speaking into me, and he was saying things to me and challenging me on some things of, like what's your dreams? What are you going to do? And I was like, wow, what are people trying to get across to me? So anyway, it was a very good trip. Well, then Doug had to, and thankfully he did, made the decision that I need to come back to Canada to have surgery. And he did come back. He was met at the airport by his daughter, and she wanted to take him to emergency immediately. He didn't. He wanted to wait until the next morning, try to get his legs back from traveling. And so then he went, and they did surgery pretty much immediately on the prostate, and took part of it out. He also has since gotten an infection, which hasn't helped. Yesterday, Sandy and I and Don went out to Doug's place to help his kids pack up his house because he's sold it, and he has to be out of the cottage down in Amick Lake by the 15th. So we went and helped them, and I'd never met Megan and Caleb before, and Henry. So we got to be able to meet them and spend time with them. So that's where Doug's at. But then that leaves us with, okay, well, what do we do for another week and a half, another 18 days? We were supposed to go up to, Doug's cottage or Doug's place up in Kruger Park and get eaten by animals or whatever, or be threatened with that. And travel and see South Africa, and that wasn't going to happen. And so Sandy and I are like, well, what does God want us to do here? And it was interesting because a number of people were saying to me, and people, oh, you're going to South Africa. What are you going for? Is it business? Is it pleasure? Is it? Are you going on a mission? And I was like, yeah, we're kind of going on a mission, but a scouting trip to see this village and so on and so forth. But it's also pleasure. We're going to be able to spend some time, seeing different sites in South Africa. This definitely was a mission trip. That's what it turned into. And Sandy and I have no regrets in any way whatsoever. We're very thankful. We're very thankful for Live Village offering a place for us to stay. The Sunday night that we left Live Village to go to ACAT, Jono, who's in charge of the whole Live Village there in Durban, said, if Doug does have to go, you are more than welcome to come back to live and spend time with us for the remaining part of your trip. And we took him up on that. And so we went through the whole process of going through what you have to do to be a volunteer, and you have to fill out all kinds of forms and so on and so forth. And the security at Live is just absolutely astronomical. 8-foot wire electric fences around the whole perimeter. You go in and out of the compound, if you want to call it that, or the village. You're stopped. They check your trunk to make sure you don't have any kids in it. You have to, when you get there, you get a sticker that you have to prove that you are a visitor there. They just don't let anyone on. There's such high security, and they protect the kids immensely because the trauma and shock and the history that these kids come to, they are so broken and so hurt and so devastated that the government has said, you need to get out of your situation because your parents aren't taking care of you, or your uncle or your aunt or whoever, they're abusing you, and you need to be put in a safe place, and LIV will be that safe place. And so they put them in that place. And so because of that, it's very interesting. We could not go up to a child and engage with them in any way whatsoever. If the child wanted to engage with us, no problem. Although the families live in a cluster, a round area, they have about 3 or 4 of these areas, and each home has a mother, and that mother takes care of a whole bunch of those kids, and she's responsible for those kids. When kids go to church, they have to sit with their mothers. They can't sit with their friends. They have to. Jono's down there on the bottom of the stage. I know you're not with your mother. Get with your mother. And it's very interesting to see how it's all orchestrated. But we couldn't just go in and say, hey, we'd like to meet your kid. Couldn't do that because they didn't want us starting at, oh, so how long have you been here? Why are you here? That would just bring up so much garbage and so much history with these kids. So we had to be very, very careful. And, we had kids that did gravitate to us, especially in the worship service. The first one that I talked about that was so emotional, I'm sitting there and I'm watching all these kids. I'm crying, Doug's crying, and Sandy's standing there, and she's got kids coming up to her, and she's laying her hands on them and praying for them, which she always does anyway. And, she was just doing what's normal. Kids just gravitate to her for some reason. And, but we couldn't just say, hey, what have you been there for? It was interesting. The last Monday that we were there, this past Monday, they have a church service every Monday morning to start the week as a group, because a lot of people, the volunteers and even the staff, will go away for the weekend and do things, but they start the week with a worship service of about a half an hour of just singing and praising God and so on and so forth. And then there's a lesson. And then they have any announcements of what's happened, good things that happened. And then what happened was this past Monday, they said, Jono gets up and he says, I want to introduce 3 new people, 3 new kids that have just come to school. And one of them was a little girl, and she was maybe 8 months old. And just a sweet little thing. And the mother's got her in her arms, and, she's just happy as all get out. And then 2 little boys that looked to be about maybe 4 and 8. And they got ushered up to the front. And if you've ever seen fear in a child, of all these people, of about 300 people looking at them and focusing on them, you can just see it. And then Jono said, if anyone wants to come and pray with them, come down and lay your hands on them, and we're going to pray together. And if you don't want to get out, just put your hands out and pray for them. And it's just wow. It was amazing to see these kids. And what I thought about this whole process, and there was a story that kept coming back to my mind. I don't know if you've ever read the story about the starfish, the little girl that's out on the shore. And she's walking along the beach, and there's starfish, just millions of starfish all over the place. And she keeps picking them up and throwing them into the ocean. And this man comes up to her and says, little girl, what are you doing? He says, well, the tide's going to come. It's going to go out. And if these don't get back in the water, they're going to die. And he's like, well, there's millions and millions of them. How are you ever going to be able to take care of all of them? And she picks one up. She throws it in the water. She says, I made a difference to that one. One child that is able to be changed. And if those children were not in LIV or other orphanages like it, what's their destiny? What's the possibility of them? My sister's crying, she's making me cry. What's the possibility? And I look at these little children that grow through the system and live and grow up to be able to have a life. And it's all centered, 100% of it is centered around Jesus. The middle of the whole sanctuary, you'll see a picture of this next week, but the whole sanctuary is about 35 acres and it's set on a hill. And right in the middle of the hill is a cross. And the cross is about 40 feet high. And when you're driving down the road, you can see it at night all lit up. There's Liv. And you can see this cross on a hill. And that's what it's all about. They bring all these kids to be able to have a relationship. And these 3 kids that were there that day, and I said to myself, well, we made a difference to that one. Made a difference to that one. And we can sit here and say, well, how are we ever going to make a difference in the world? How are we ever going to make a difference in, all these kids that are homeless? And if you want to talk about poverty, if you want to talk about devastation, go to South Africa. The unemployment rate right now in South Africa is 40%. 4 out of every 10 people do not have a job. Their minimum wage, $3.50 an hour. Their gas is more expensive than our gas. I don't know how they live. And because of the unemployment, because of that, there is so much violence and crime that happens. And that's why it's so secure. It's amazing. As you're driving out to the village, just right there's another tiny little village. Would you not say that the majority of the stuff that's in there could be taken from our dumps? And that's what they make their homes with. And then you drive on to Live Village, and there is a peace. There's a calmness that is just absolutely amazing. And it's only because of one thing. It's centered around that cross. It's centered around what Jesus did for these little souls. Not just those souls, it's also our souls. And to look and see what these kids go through. On Monday morning, I had a little boy that I kind of, every once in a while I'd see him in the village, and, the big thing is to do props. And, he'd come up and he'd give me props and he'd give Sandy and he was just very friendly. And all the kids were very friendly, very polite, very hello, sir, hello, ma'am, just very, very respectful. But he's sitting beside me on Monday, and there's 3 chairs in between us. And then all of a sudden, he jumps over one chair. And we're kind of looking at each other and, kind of snickering with each other. And he moves over another chair. We keep going at it. We're bantering with each other. And then he moves beside me. Kind of snuggles up to me. And I started asking him some questions. So what are you going to do today? What are you going to learn in school today? I don't know. Are you going to have gym today? Yeah. What are you going to play? I'm going to play rugby today. Rugby is the national sport. That's what everybody wants to do. I said, so when you grow up, do you want to be a rugby player? No. What do you want to do? I want to be a snake catcher. I said, well, you're not going to have a lot of competition. Then I said, how many snakes have you got? Got 5. But anyway, what they do for excitement and entertainment is totally different. Each of the kids, or a lot of the kids, have what I would call a dreidel. Did you see those tops, the kids playing with them when you were there? It's just a little piece of clay, and they wrap a string around it. And they throw it on the ground, and it just spins like crazy. And then they, remember the old game Battling Tops? They try to do that, hit each other out. It's the only toy they have. They can go to the basketball court and play basketball. Got a really nice auditorium, gymnasium slash conference center, everything. It's all in one. It's just this big concrete slab that's got a roof over it and some lights in it, and they can play. And they've got all kinds of sports for the kids to do there. But talk about simplistic. Monkeys running all over the place, picking fruit and throwing it at people, and And I'm like, wow, why are these people so happy? Living in poverty. It's hard to come back and see what we live in and what we take for granted. And it's absolutely amazing. No, these are kids that have been awarded by the state, by the government, who have gone through some sort of abuse, whether it be or neglect or parents just give them up, and the government gives them to the village. So let me close with this. Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But his disciples rebuked them. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them. For the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." When he placed his hands on them, he went on from there. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea." People were also bringing babies to Jesus for him to place his hands on them. When the disciples saw this, they rebuked them. But Jesus called the children to him and said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a child, a little child, will never enter it." Stay tuned for part 2 next week.